All right. Oh, you want to change your name and Zoom?
Right.
And we'll hit record in Audacity as well. Test, test. Is it picking it up? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Audacity is picking up mine as well. So, okay. You hit record on your computer?
Yep.
On your Zoom? Got it.
Yep. On Zoom. Yeah, we're good to go. It's recording. Look at the top left. It shows it.
Yep. Got it. Okay. Welcome to the first episode of Boundary Spanners. And if you're here, it's because you're listening to Nate and I. My name is Abi, and I have with me my friend and co-host Nate. And this podcast is largely about trying to find solutions to residential decarbonization, residential electrification that span the boundaries of policy, research, technology, implementation, and so on. In this episode in particular, we're going to talk about, Nate is going to make the case for why the road to successful electrification in the residential space, or to get to any of our future energy goals with regards to climate or a resilient grid or a more efficient energy system, the roads to success on each of these destinations has to go through HVAC contractors. So why do you say that, Nate?
Well, the most important piece of it is that almost all residential HVAC replacements happen on an emergency basis. So when your furnace goes out, it usually ain't warm outside. When your air conditioner goes out, it's usually not cold outside. So 85% of residential HVAC, give or take, you could argue plus or minus 5%, but let's call it 85. It's replaced on an emergency basis. So when your furnace goes out, do you call the insulation guy?
No.
How about the plumber?
No.
Roofer?
No, and not Ghostbusters either.
Oh, dang it. Who are you going to call?
The HVAC guys.
Yes. So they are the ones that are when it comes to replacement, and culturally, we are, as Americans, typically pretty bad about deferred maintenance. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, that's a cultural maxim. I'm sure it happens in plenty of other cultures as well. But if you wait until something fails, and it's a very expensive thing, and particularly in the wintertime, if it's below freezing and your furnace is out, are you going to be freaked out?
You betcha.
So are you likely to make a good decision?
Not under the best of circumstances, but especially on a cold night. So I'm trying to put myself in this situation, right? So it's a cold night, and 2 a.m, my heating has suddenly stopped working. I've got a cold apartment that's probably leaking heat every second. I've got angry pets / kids, perhaps. This is a purchase or a budget decision that is likely going to be the most expensive unplanned budget decision of the entire year. And it's probably going to be the most stressful night of my entire year. Does that about sum it up?
Yeah, that's dead on. I tell you, it gave one presentation and found a GIF of someone from a sitcom catching their hair on fire, and underneath it, I put the caption: "Actual footage of a homeowner with a broken furnace." Yeah, this is something that people freak out about.
So you're telling me in North America, let's say US and Canada,
Mhm.
85% of HVAC, so furnace replacements
Yep.
happen
Water
under
heater too.
water heaters
Yep.
happen under duress. So one day it suddenly breaks. On that day, you didn't plan for it. You've got 800 different things going on with your life.
Yep.
And you just want someone to come in quickly and cheaply to solve the problem for you.
Yeah, you want heat. You don't necessarily care about all of the other little niceties of it. Like, do you want a variable speed piece of equipment? Probably not. So it also, like, the numbers, I'm probably off by 1% or 2, but it's also right in the 85% range of residential HVAC is single stage, which means it's on or it's off. And in the chapter that we give out for free to anybody who will read it, HVAC 101 from my book, the Home Comfort book, it compares the HVAC system in your car to that in your house. And cars have really good HVAC systems. So
No
there's
way.
6 things that every HVAC system should do. Every car does 5. Most houses do none. And the first and most important one for comfort is load matching, which is it puts out exactly as much heating or cooling as the house needs at that moment. And that varies through the year, moment by moment, day by day, season by season. It's never the same. You look at 2 days and it'll be different because the sun's out hard one day and it's not the next. Different heat loads or cooling loads. So being able to match that is the easiest way to think of it is if you had 10 gallons to take a shower, and I'm going to give you 2 choices. I can either dump a 10-gallon bucket over your head, or you can go take a 5-minute shower. Which one do you want? So single speed equipment is like that bucket. It's the same amount of energy, the same amount of heat that's delivered, but it's delivered too quickly. And what that does is it spikes your temperature up, and then it slides, and then it spikes it up, and then it slides. Where what you want is a constant stream of a little bit of heat or a little bit of cool, so it keeps your temperature like almost dead even. But when you're under duress, you are thinking, who is the first person who can get to my house with the first piece of equipment they can get their hands on so that I have heat? We as humans make really bad decisions under duress. Like unless we have trained. I mean, this is why the military trains, so that when you find yourself under duress, it is instinct to react the correct way. I mean, sports is the same way. Like all disciplines ultimately, well, they're called disciplines because it helps you be disciplined to react in a non-emotional way to emotional circumstances.
So you're building that muscle memory to take a certain action in response to a stimulus. Whereas if you're a homeowner, you don't have the same trigger discipline, right? And your default to, I need someone to solve this pain as quickly as possible, and preferably as I was about to say as inexpensive as possible, but that's not entirely true, is it? Because it's not inexpensive in the long run. No one is doing a life cycle cost assessment at point of purchase. You just want the cheapest equipment at that moment, someone who can get it in fast. And then now you've locked in a natural gas system, let's say, for what, 15, 20 years?
Yep, in that ballpark. I mean, at least a decade, and probably more like 2.
So you've lost the opportunity to decarbonize a home for about a decade or so, 2 decades.
Yep.
And so across America, let's say United States of America, given that we know, like median fail, like these equipment fail in about 15 years, roughly, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
How often does an opportunity to decarbonize, how often are we letting go of a perfect opportunity to replace a gas furnace with maybe electric or a cleaner alternative? Is it like a couple of HVAC systems a day, a couple of households a day?
Yeah, so it's closer to a couple a second. But
no way.
Well, it's not quite that often, but so let's just for sake of argument say there's 100 million existing homes in the United States. It's something like 114, but round numbers, we'll just call it 100. And if we assume a 20-year replacement, that means 5 million a year are being replaced.
Yep.
There's 8 million heat pumps and furnaces sold every year, so I know that number is low in the United States. But let's just say it's five. 5 million systems per year works out to a new system started up every 6 seconds.
Wow. So every 6 seconds, we have the opportunity to electrify a home, and we're letting it go because of how the circumstances in the market is structured. So you talked about the lack of deferred maintenance, and that's a broader cultural problem, right? We don't fix things anymore. We use it until it breaks, and then we get new things. There's a decline in like shop class, and we'll spend an entire episode talking about those aspects across culture, like how we don't fix things anymore. But specifically, you were talking about how, because deferred maintenance is not really a thing, we have this problem where
preventative maintenance actually is not usually a thing.
Right, preventative maintenance. So it creates an incentive structure where both the homeowner and HVAC contractors are trying to put in the quickest, cheapest bid to get the project. Does home ownership play into this? Like, because I know not many people live in their forever homes anymore.
Yeah.
I think people used to live 17, 18 years in a home. The average median number of years a homeowner lived in a house is shrinking across North America. And that's, again, another entire episode about the assetization of homes and what it means for decarbonization. So if you're a homeowner and you don't expect to live there for long, how would you make a decision under duress like that? What happens?
Cheapest piece of crap I can get in there. I mean, personally, until this house that I'm sitting in, because there's a heat pump sitting in my barn to be installed in a couple of weeks. This is our 5th house in 15 years of marriage. One of them we lived in for 9, thought it was going to be our forever house, and then learned the principles of financial independence and decided we were going to sell that, put half the money in the market, and buy a house that costs half as much. And that's what we did. And it actually worked out really well. So assets went up enough that we bought another house with the same money, because we bought on the way down on COVID. So it was lucky. But my point is, in 15 years of marriage, 5 houses, we bought one piece of equipment, and it was a furnace for our second house. And it was while we were selling the house, and the fellow who was buying it from us, it was a first-time home buyer. It was 2010, so it was difficult to sell anything. And the guy kept moving the needle, like, well, if you do this, this, and this, we're good. And then we'd get another letter from his realtor. You need to fix this, this, and this. And I'm like, what part of we had a deal don't you understand? And it turned out the heat exchanger was cracked on the furnace. So I had to replace one. So I remember calling, because it's not easy to buy a furnace without an HVAC license, but there's a lumber yard by me that would do it. And I called them, like, what is the cheapest piece of crap furnace you have that I can put in? And so, I mean, I replaced that furnace out of anger. It would have been smarter for him to ask me for the money, like ask for $1,000 off or $1,500 off or whatever it would be, because I bought the furnace for $600, and then I found an HVAC tech to install it on a Saturday for another $600 or $800. But I mean, I didn't have any money at that point. Like that was annoying. But I think that is going to be fairly typical of it, because if you buy a piece of HVAC equipment, you don't expect to be there for the life of it. I mean, 5 houses in, I bought one.
Right. And so a lot of families, their experience, with home ownership might not take the same path as yours, but there's some similarities, right? Because, uprootedness is very much a characteristic of modern life. And people move homes, move communities, move countries. I did. I went from India to Michigan to now Canada, seeking better opportunities and better life for themselves, and seeking to belong to different places. And as a consequence, not a lot of people get to live in a forever home anymore. Not a lot of people get to plant deep roots anymore. And so when you're making a budgetary decision under duress, are you thinking at all, as a homeowner, do you find that homeowners are thinking at all about like the cost recovery aspect of this. So, so for example, like if I took $10,000 and put it in a new kitchen countertops, at the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, yes, I mean, there's aesthetic value and this increase in quality of my life, but I also know that there's a significant percentage of the cost I can recover when I sell my house and move to a different place. But these factors don't play into, it's not an investment. Can you expand on that? We've talked about this before, so can you expand on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, to the countertop thing, I mean, I've read a bunch of articles about this sort of thing. What was it? I think a new front door was like the best payback of anything that you could get, because it could substantially change how the house looks.
It's the first thing people
Countertops-
walk through in a house.
Yeah. So you want to make a good impression. So a new front door for $1,000 or $1,500 can be really helpful. Although those numbers always seem too low to me, because I've got a client that recently paid $7,000 for a new front door, just the door. Like, I was dang. But the countertops, you can probably expect half or 3/4 of your money back, because the house is going to be a lot nicer. It's probably going to be part of a renovation of the kitchen. But yeah, when it comes to infrastructure, if you have a new roof on a house, is that house worth anything more than a house with a 5-year-old roof or a 10-year-old roof or even a 20-year-old roof?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. I mean, it might be a point of negotiation. It was on our now third house. It had a 25-year-old roof, and it was getting to be due. So one of the points of negotiation on that was, how much will it cost to do the roof? And I was like, well, probably going to be somewhere between 10 and 14,000. And these people were coming in from Connecticut, and they're like, I think that's at least 20 or 25. It's a market specific thing. I got a bid for 9,500. And they said yes, because now it was there. But a house is expected to have a roof. It's expected to have a heating or cooling system. And it doesn't matter. I mean, my mom sold her house. It was the house that I grew up in as a teenager. It had 2 furnaces in it, and both of them cracked. And actually, they damn near killed her. She had bad carbon monoxide poisoning. If she hadn't left to go to a friend's house, she'd probably be dead.
Wow.
So that's another piece of combustion appliances that's pretty interesting. But in selling the house, they're like, we demand that you replace these furnaces, which I understand, but that was just a hit out of it. But that's not a good decision. You generally don't want to have the seller do something for you, because they're going to find the cheapest, crappiest way to check that box. It's the same problem with new construction. Oh, it's a new house. It's built well. No, it's built to code, which is the crappiest house that you're allowed to sell by law. And they're often not that great.
Talking about code will be, it'll be an entire season. We've got a season's worth of content to mine about the challenges of decarbonizing when the code really means that you're trying to do the bare minimum to skate by regulations, right? So we'll talk about that in a different time.
Yeah, we'll set that one aside. Yeah.
So let me circle back then to summarize. Every 6 seconds, roughly, an opportunity to decarbonize a home for 15 years goes missing because 85% of people are making budgetary decisions under duress.
Yep.
And that the budgetary decisions that they're making, the cost of that investment is not reflected in resale value for the home. Is that right? So
yeah, you're not going to get a penny extra. Does it have a furnace? Okay.
Yeah, good.
Does it have an air conditioner? Okay.
And so because of this, roughly every household's path to decarbonization goes through an HVAC contractor.
Yep.
So if I'm a policymaker, right? Let's say I'm the governor of the 51st state of America, and I have a goal of decarbonizing households by 2050. And I come to you and say, Nate, this is my bold and ambitious climate target. We have, let's say, 1 million households in our state. over the next, 2050, that's like, I mean, it's not too far from here, 30 years, less than 30 years from now, why should I bring HVAC contractors on site? Help me understand. So can you make the case? Like, why is it important for me to work with HVAC contractors? Why can't I work with utilities, municipalities, transmission companies, X, Y, and Z? I have relationships with all these institutions, but HVAC contractors, largely because they're a private enterprise, not quasi-public institutions like utilities and municipalities and so on. I do not have a lot of regulatory levers or policy levers that I can pull to. So why do I need to bring HVAC contractors on site? Help me understand.
Well, the first one we've already covered pretty hard, which is that 85% of systems are replaced under duress. So the HVAC contractors are the only ones that are likely to get that call. And when it comes to home decarbonization, you are looking at the furnace, the water heater, the dryer, and the stove. Those are the big four. Sometimes there's a fireplace. But the HVAC, particularly in cold climates, is by far your big guy. So, I mean, it was interesting taking a trip to California last fall and looking at bills. Water heat and space heat are basically equal. You use 120, 150 therms for water heat, and then 120, 150 therms for heat, which is part of what makes it such a good heat pump climate. It's like, why on earth does California sell anything other than a heat pump? Because the furnaces are 10 times larger than they need to be for even like a small furnace. It's silly. It's misapplied. Misapplied in engineering, like that's like insulting someone's mother's honor. Like, it's a big deal. You will get into a fight. You misapplied that piece of equipment. I just called you incompetent and worthless. That's a bad thing. And heat pumps are misapplied in California. So anyway, 50-50 usage there. But you get into a cold climate like both of us live in, Cleveland, Denver, Toronto, any of these colder climates. Now water heat's about 10% of the gas usage of a house, maybe 15, maybe 5, depending on a bunch of things, but it's 10% give or take usually. So space heating is by far the elephant in the room. Who changes the space heating in a house? HVAC.
The contractors, yep.
I mean, it just is. And when it comes to changing heating and cooling systems, I don't know that a lot of policymakers probably understand how complex the HVAC trade is.
Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's 3 trades minimum required to do HVAC work if you're talking heating and cooling. And I mean, that's I could be Adams Heating and Air. It's just a common thing. So you need to know refrigeration. So there's 3 trades: refrigeration, which is dealing with the refrigerant, and that's going to be your air conditioning, or it can be a heat pump as well, because a heat pump is the same piece of equipment as an air conditioner. It just has a couple of extra parts, so it can run backwards. So it heats and cools. So refrigeration's there, and then plumbing, and then electrical. And so you have to know those 3 to do it. And boy, are they, like, systems are complicated. I'm decent at electric work. I just added a bunch of outlets to this house. Not a big deal. It's 3 wires, hot, neutral, ground. You just keep them going to the right place through everything, and it just freaking works. Sometimes somebody wires something different, which I had, and I've wired switches like 5 ways before I finally went and got my tester to figure out what was hot. And the line that came in that was hot was red. And that's supposed to be a jumper for a 2-way or 3-way switch. So I didn't think that was going to be what it was, but it wasn't working. So I had to go figure it out. But that was a relatively simple troubleshooting affair, where when you think about what an HVAC contractor needs to be able to do to go do service techs, I mean, we should call them sir or ma'am, because they have to know so much. Pull up to any house with any random system installed in various poor ways and quickly figure out what it is, figure out what part it is, see if they have it on their truck. If they do, replace it. If they don't, order it, charge a customer, get out of there. And they'll do 10 of those a day.
So it's plumbing, refrigeration, electrical.
Yep.
There's sheet metal too, right?
Sheet metal and I mean carpentry sometimes.
Carpentry, yeah.
I mean, in lots of parts of the country where it's in a closet, they're going to have to make changes. It's a multi-trade trade, if you will.
And this is for the men and women who are just the techs, but the industry itself, you need salespeople, project managers, marketing people, admin, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
and
it's immensely complicated as a trade.
And each HVAC system is unique in a way, right? Because so even in the same like a neighborhood where two houses might be identical, the installation of two HVAC systems might be identical. To diagnose the problems that the homeowner might be having, it might. Can you expand on that? Because we've talked about this before, how two houses, two systems in the same neighborhood might end up having different, comfort outcomes or home energy outcomes for homeowners because of all the variables involved.
Yeah, there's so many pieces. I mean, two houses right next to each other. What are the odds that the same crews work through both houses all the way? If it's the same companies that did it, it was different crews. So, one house might be leakier than the other. One may be in a different site that has more of a moisture problem than the other one. So there's more dehumidification load to deal with. My friend T. Gronis, who had this Energy Star home built that was a train wreck. He had a spring running underneath the basement floor. And so he had all these humidity issues that they're just like, what's going on? And there was actually a spring that was coming up right underneath the house was part of it. And then they misapplied a piece of HVAC in there. It was single stage, it was oversized, and it was zoned where one of the zones is only 10% of the flow of the system, which you are not supposed to do. It's supposed to be pretty even on zones, maybe 40, 60, but not further out than that. So there were all these different things that were wrong. So if you look at two houses, who constructed them is going to be different. The site conditions are going to be different. They may have gotten a different piece of equipment. The equipment may have been commissioned differently and oftentimes incorrectly. It's we were a little bit low on refrigerant, whatever, ship it. Or one didn't get vacuumed down and the thing burns itself out in a couple of years. Like there's all of these different factors.
And the people who live in those households are different.
Yeah.
And the way they behave, the number of people, and how they interact with the system. So you've got multiple systems embedded within systems. So you've got so it's not like taking your incandescent light bulb out and putting an LED thing in. You have to integrate a system, a complicated machinery with your system, which is the house, that interacts with a whole other variable, which is people in the house. And to deal with this one system, the HVAC system, you need people who have skills in at least 3 trades, if not 5 trades.
Yep.
And we expect these people to, and so the future of being able to decarbonize our households rests on the ability of these, these men and women who are, because of the size of the market and the labor force, are already overworked.
Yes.
And they're doing 10 of these a day.
Yep. Yeah. 10 service calls a day is pretty common. So we have multiple challenges there. One is we need more bodies and brains in the trades. So that's probably a whole nother thing. That's the demise of shop class. And one of my theories is cars are so good that kids don't learn how to work on them. So I'm kind of the last of the generation that is used to working on cars. Doesn't mean I like to, but I'll still do brakes and oil. That's about all I want to do anymore. But I've rebuilt an engine, 3 of them, only one blew up. Pretty good batting average. That sucked. But this is really complex. So the key point that I make here is, if you think you're in the solar world and you're going to parachute into the HVAC world, you're landing in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I guess we all know how that turned out, but
yeah, because that just happened,
yeah,
what, a day or two
well,
ago as we're recording this.
as we're recording this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it, it, it all starts and ends with HVAC. So HVAC could add solar. HVAC could add batteries, and like that would be in their wheelhouse because they're already electrical contractors. Either they have an electrician on staff or they routinely work with an electrician is usually how it works. They're used to doing all of this stuff. But the solar, it's simple. I mean, it just isn't that hard. It's a few appliances that you plug together. I mean, it's not like it's crazy simple, but it's just not that hard. I mean, I've got a solar system for our camper, so I had to figure out, so how's the inverter work? How does the battery work? How do the panels work? And I was like, oh, it was a little bit of a learning curve, but it wasn't that bad.
And so so you're saying solar is easier in reference to HVAC because you can kind of
it's one trade.
It's one trade. It's modular systems, and you can design from afar, and then you can deploy just in a distributed way. And these are like Lego blocks. They kind of plug into each other, and you need some local crew to go behind that. But it's not like you're not working with 3 or 4 trades. You're not diagnosing anything, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a new install. You're not changing something out.
Okay, so number one thing that you said your policymakers might not understand is just how many skills we expect out of HVAC contractors to be able to respond to the emergency duress situation, leave alone decarbonization, and all these other objectives.
Yep.
So when policymakers try to respond to those goals by, for example, giving incentives for giving an incentive for replacing to a more efficient furnace, or giving you like a $500 rebate for switching to a heat pump or something like that. How does the HVAC contractor react to incentive programs like this? Does it help? Does it hinder?
Yeah, what was it? Jed Trott just replied this beautiful reply, if I can try and stick with it, about programs that touch the kitchen table transaction. It was if it's difficult to explain and you have to explain it, it's not helping.
Got it.
So just the act of, so I'll take the gas company one that I worked with. They would give you $400 to go from like a 90 to a 94% furnace, or maybe it was an 85 to a 94, whatever it was. It was taking a step up. It didn't actually cover the cost difference between the two. But just by bringing that up, you just slowed down the process of the sales process. So and I mean, this is one where I hear a lot of talk about, so we should just add that to the real estate transaction. Like, good God, they're complicated anyway. Like, realtors do not want to add anything that could cause more drama into the transaction, because having bought and sold a whole bunch of houses, every transaction has drama, every single one. And so there's always something going on, something unexpected. You don't want to throw anything more into an already complex sale. And that's true with HVAC too. So don't mess with the kitchen table transaction, for the love of God. I mean, just don't. You are hurting closing ratios and usually hurting job sizes, which means you're hurting profitability. And if we want to talk about sustainability, losing money is not sustainable.
I think that'll be a whole nother episode for us to talk about the as you call it, the church of the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And what happens to contractors when they have to pivot to incorporate a funding program or a incentive model that doesn't really have long legs. A lot of contractors many of them are family-run businesses. So people who've been second generation, third generation contractors.
Third generation, yeah.
And now they're pivoting to work around or work with a funding stream that may or may not exist. And if it gets yanked away, then they have to, again, you're just making it difficult for them to have a sustainable business model in the future. So that's a whole other episode for us to dig into.
Feed the bears. We can call that one. Don't feed the bears, because it's in varying degrees. You're feeding the bears. Sometimes you just give them a snack and they just come back, but sometimes they are entirely dependent on you. And then when you take the program away, they die, which I've seen again and again.
Right. And so I want to pick up on what you said earlier, which is the men and women that come to your home as HVAC contractors.
Mhm.
We need to call them, like you said, sirs, or not, because they're like they're a home doctor, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
there
definitely.
to help
Or at
diagnose,
least an HVAC doctor.
right? Home
We're
energy
trying to
doctor,
turn them into home doctors, but yeah,
right?
for now, yeah, home energy, yeah, it's HVAC doctors, definitely.
So no other trade or industry has such a critical touch point with the residential sectors like HVAC contractors do. Is that your pitch?
Yeah, there is no other vertical, no other path to do this. We would have to create an entire new contractor army, an entire new vertical. Um, if we want to do this quickly, forget about it. There is no path. All paths lead through HVAC. Period. Um, and if you think otherwise, great, prove it to me, because we spent a decade trying to find the other way, and it doesn't exist. Um, so
And so for those 85% of people who are making that replacement budget decision under duress, when a contractor shows up with the cheapest product fastest, ideally we want to get to a point in the industry where HVAC contractors are not competing on price, but they're competing on value.
decommoditize.
Yeah, so HVAC is commodified again. Like that's a whole nother. We've got a whole season mapped out here. So challenges with commodifying HVAC when contractors compete on price, everyone races to the bottom on the cheapest price and the lowest bid, and consumers lose. Everyone loses.
Yeah, nobody wins.
So we need to, and that's a point of this podcast, is as boundary spanners, we're trying to iterate our thinking around this central point. 85% of people are making a budget decision under duress, and the contractors that show up with the cheapest and fastest bid are often the contractors that are competing on price and a quick sale and large volume. They just want to they want to get rid of inventory. They want to do a quick job in and out. Now we've locked in a gas infrastructure or a low energy, and high energy consuming asset for another 15, 20 years, and we've lost that opportunity.
Yep, it's gone. And that's not an insubstantial portion of it. I mean, that's what, 10 or 15% of fossil fuel usage in the US, if memory serves. So I mean, this is not I mean, none of the slices are gigantic. That's like the third or fourth largest slice.
So I guess this is the value proposition for this podcast is we know that this is happening, and this is an industry-wide problem. And you've described this in the past as a wicked problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so my understanding of wicked problems, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that wicked problems are, problems that don't have a clear solution, and the solution is spread across multiple domains. Here we're talking about human psychology, right, under duress. We're talking about a whole industry whose business practices are predicated on making a quick sell. We've got marketing that aligns with, we've got digital marketing now where people, you're searching for keywords. How do I fix broken, contract? And then they get contractors lined up whose business models are oriented to responding to these calls to fix my stuff super quick. And you've got an entire, right from college, community college, people being trained on just slinging boxes and not thinking through about how to solve for comfort. That's turning an HVAC doctor into a home energy doctor or home comfort doctor. Integrating building science with HVAC is not really something that's, so we've got systemic issues. And so it's like, so is my understanding of how you've described HVAC as a wicked problem, right? So we've got, and so we need, it might need people like you and I to explore solutions to this, that the solutions that span the boundaries of both implementation, HVAC business, sales process, marketing, policy making, politics, governance,
manufacturing,
distribution chains.
Yeah, this is a really, really messy problem. And I mean, one thing that we can suggest, early on here, I threw out an idea back in January about paying the manufacturers to stop making stop making air conditioners, because an air conditioner and a heat pump, if you look at any air conditioner, it has a heat pump version, with the only exception of the bottom efficiency, 13 SEER. So 14 SEER and up, if there's an air conditioner, there's also a heat pump. And the cost difference is usually $300 to $600 between them, pretty consistently around 400. So if under duress, you want to solve this problem now, find a way to pay distributors or manufacturers to only make and stock heat pumps, period. So under duress, if they get an air conditioner, they get a heat pump. Like maybe it's not even hooked up as a heat pump, but this is a few $100s, which is really cheap compared to all of the other options on the table. I mean, the Brits are talking about $10,000, $20,000 incentives
per house.
Per house, yeah, and I'm talking about $400.
It's the
So
same
this
thing here in
isn't
Canada.
necessarily crazy.
Yeah, we've got $3,000, $4,000 home retrofit grants in the moment right now. But again, who knows how these things will come and go. But so I think that we'll pick up on that in the next episode. When we talk about the church at the kitchen table, and you're taking the decision in a way, you're moving the incentive structure upstream so that when the contractor shows up, the homeowner, if they are getting a furnace, a heat pump that acts as a furnace, they're also getting an air conditioner. If they're getting an air conditioner, they're also getting heat. And then we can talk, maybe we can talk next episode about the policy proposal that you co-wrote and how that ties in with the church of kitchen table concept. And how
But in the meantime, the important point of the episode is to drive home that all roads to home decarbonization go through the HVAC industry. And there is no other viable path that I can see, and we've looked.
So from your vantage point, within the HVAC industry, is the HVAC industry ready to take on this, respond to this challenge? And roll
I'm
their
going to
sleeves
try
up
not to swear, so I'll say hell no. I mean, we were talking to someone, pretty high up in the Canadian system, so the Canadian HVAC industry, and he said, "So here I am leading the army of decarbonization warriors. Who's with me?" And thinking that all the HVAC contractors are behind him. He turns around, he's like, "Nobody's there."
Guys, girls, yeah.
Hello. Bueller. I mean, that is where we are right now. There's a few people, but even if you are really gung-ho electrification as a contractor, you still have to talk the customer into it. They need to understand. They need to buy it. I mean, you've heard me say this a bunch of times: treatment plans that aren't executed, and then the dead patients that result are stupid. So we need to be creating treatment plans that people actually follow. And if consumers don't understand the benefits to better equipment, like HVAC 101 compares home and car HVAC. If people don't understand what the differences are and see the value, they're not going to do it. And then if they are under duress, even if you try to explain something to them, they're going to be like, just do it, just get it in. What's the cheapest? So we have to solve that emergency problem, and we have to solve a contractor education problem, and we have to solve a consumer education problem.
Consumer awareness, consumer demand.
Yep. And resale, like you were mentioning, like if we don't solve resale to some degree, we're in a lot of trouble as far as scale goes too. So it's a wicked problem. There's all of these different pieces. And then like the manufacturers, every major manufacturer, at least, if they make air conditioners, which is most of them, they make heat pumps. They just do, because it's the same piece of equipment. But most manufacturers are nervous about this. And it's like, guys, we're going to sell more of your high-end stuff. Like, you should be happy. This should be more profitable stuff. But everyone is nervous about this, because there is a lot of risk, particularly with full decarbonization. There's a lot of risk of failure. So that's another whole episode.
And in the past, a lot of the risk of participating in decarbonization electrification programs has been borne by HVAC contractors, right?
Yep.
You've talked about taking on, expanding into insulation and business like that to provide decarbonization or energy efficiency stuff, and that just leads to CapEx stuff. And again, we can dig into that later. So the bottom line here is, to summarize again, the road to residential decarbonization, and actually the road to locking in residential carbonization right now, goes through HVAC contractors.
Yep. For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. So to decarbonize, you cannot but not go through the same contractors. But right now, everyone is locked into this really corrosive behavior patterns where 85% of decisions are made under duress, and contractors compete on price. And because it's such a highly valued skill trade, and the decision made under duress, not many contractors have the time to carefully think through and right size and suggest a decarbonization alternative, in part because of the price difference, $500, $400 difference between a heat pump and a furnace, but also in part because the homeowner doesn't really know it, want it, trust it, there's not consumer demand. And so these factors together are going to make it extremely difficult to decarbonize. And so far, we don't have to get into the details of the programs and projects yet, but from your experience and mine, so far, the efforts that we've seen, like small pilot projects, like little incentive programs here and there, only end up fueling this corrosive cycle of like commodification of HVAC, quick replacement, locking in carbon infrastructure for years. And one of what we're trying to do through this podcast and other things that you and I are involved with is to unpack this Gordian knot and explore what solutions might lie in the boundaries of policy, research, technology, implementation, business practices, sales, trades, and so on.
Yeah, it's just a little complicated, no big deal. We just have to take a multi-billion-dollar, 100-year-old industry and turn it on its head. Not a problem.
Sounds good. When do I start?
How's last week for you? Can we have this accomplished, like now, give or take?
Does it pay well? Is there money in that?
Currently, no. Which is another problem. So let's go sell equipment that has higher likelihood of failure and callback and unhappy customers, which is another problem that comes with this. It's quite the knot. It really is. So we'll talk about that more next time, right?
Looking forward to it, Nate. Thanks a lot for doing this with me.
It's my pleasure.
Boundary spanners, we need a gang sign.
I don't know what's it gonna be.
Is that B? I don't know. We'll think of it next time.
We'll come up with that. See you next time, Abhi.
Adios.